Hello, how are you today? We will share some disturbing stories about neighbors. Do you have a strange neighbor, someone you suspect? Let's get into the stories. Sometimes, knowledge is a curse. 5 years ago, I didn't know what I know now. I didn't wake up every night checking if the curtains were fully closed. I didn't avoid looking out the kitchen window for fear of seeing those eyes watching me from the house next door. But now I'm almost certain that my neighbor killed his own son. Charles and his family moved into the house next door 10 years ago. They were the picture-perfect family. Him, his wife Sarah, and Tommy, their 9-year-old son. Charles was an accountant, Sarah gave piano lessons at home, and Tommy was the kind of kid who always greeted the neighbors with a smile. Gone till the night Tommy disappeared. It was a Tuesday in October. Tommy had gone out for a bike ride after school, like he did every day. But this time, he never came home. The police were called, posters were put up, searches were organized. Nothing. The first few months after his disappearance went as expected. Charles and Sarah were devastated, barely leaving their house. The piano lessons stopped. The lights in their home stayed on all night. Normal behavior for parents who had lost a child. But then things started to change. First, it was Charles's behavior. His initial grief gave way to something different, a kind of constant nervous tension. He started avoiding eye contact with the neighbors. He installed security cameras all around the property. He built a taller fence. Sarah practically disappeared. We rarely saw her outside, and when she did appear, she looked different, thinner, paler, with a vacant stare that made me think of someone suffering from severe trauma. The few times I tried to speak to her, Charles would suddenly show up, practically dragging her back inside. 3 years after Tommy disappeared, I noticed Charles making improvements in his backyard. First, it was a newly paved area, then a raised garden bed for a garden that was never planted. Every project involved digging, removing soil, modifying the terrain. Then on a rainy night in April, he knocked on my door. "Can I borrow your shovel?" he asked, drenched from the rain. Mine broke. There was something in his eyes, a feverish, almost manic glint. And behind him, through the rain, I could see a partially dug hole in his yard. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, and through my bedroom window I could see Charles working under the light of a flashlight. The hole was already deep, deeper than any garden bed would ever need to be. Around 3 in the morning, I saw him throw something heavy into the hole. A large black garbage bag big enough to... No, I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I waited until he went inside, and in a decision that still haunts me, I grabbed my own flashlight and went to the backyard. The hole was partially covered, but I could see the edge of the black bag. There was something solid inside, something about the size of... A noise made me freeze. The back door of Charles's house was opening. I ran back to my house, my heart pounding in my chest. Through my window, I saw Charles walking back to the yard, this time carrying a different shovel. For the next 2 hours, I watched as he dug up the bag, dragged it to his car, and drove off into the darkness. When he returned, his car was empty, and his clothes were covered in mud. The next morning, the hole was completely gone, replaced by a fresh flower bed. From that night on, everything changed. Charles started watching me. Not in an obvious way, but I could feel his eyes on me. When I went outside to get the newspaper, he was at his window. When I got home from work, I saw the curtains move slightly. Sarah stopped leaving the house completely. The few times I saw her through the window, she looked like she had been crying. One night, I heard screams coming from the house. She was yelling something about not being able to take it anymore, and we need to tell the truth. The next day, the house was silent, and Sarah had a bruise on her face. I thought about going to the police, but with what evidence? A hole in the backyard that was no longer there? A black bag that had disappeared? Who would believe that a father, had kept his son's body for years, only to finally get rid of it on a rainy night. But the coincidences kept piling up. The date Charles dug the hole, it was Tommy's 14th birthday, the spot where he built the flower bed, exactly where Tommy used to keep his bike, and Sarah's nightmares, which I could hear through the thin walls on silent nights, always screaming her son's name. Last week I found something that made my blood run cold. Reviewing my old security footage, I found a recording from the night Tommy disappeared, something I had never noticed before. Tommy actually came home that night. His bike can be seen rolling into the driveway at 6:47 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw him. Charles must have figured out that I had the recording. Last night, while I was watching TV, I saw his reflection on the screen, standing on the other side of my window, watching me with that same feverish look from the night of the hole. When I turned on the outdoor lights, he didn't run, didn't hide. He just smiled, a smile that said, "Now you know too much." Tomorrow I'm putting my house up for sale. I can't live here anymore. Not with this knowledge, not with Charles watching me, not with Sarah's nightly screams. But I wonder, will I ever truly escape? Will the sound of that shovel digging into the rainy night ever stop echoing in my mind? And more importantly, was Tommy really his only victim? How many other secrets has Charles buried and dug up over the years? How many other holes have been covered by innocent-looking flower beds? Last night, I heard the sound of a shovel again. When I looked out the window, I saw Charles in the backyard, starting to dig another hole. When he noticed me watching, he stopped, looked directly at me and made a gesture. He pointed at the hole, then at my house. The message was clear. If I don't stay quiet, the next hole will be for me. And if it's true, comment your thoughts on this story and stay tuned for the next one. There are childhood memories you try to bury, moments your brain tries to rationalize as nightmares or just a child's overactive imagination. But some are too real, too traumatic to be forgotten. Like that summer when I was 13 and my brother, Michael, was 11, and we discovered that real monsters sometimes look like normal kids. Todd and Eric moved into the house next door in June. They were 14 and 12, close to our ages. At first, they just seemed a little strange, too quiet, too serious for boys their age. Their parents were never seen, and the house always had the curtains closed. The first time we really talked, they invited us to shoot BB guns by the river. Michael was excited. We had never held a gun before, not even a toy one. Our parents were strict about that sort of thing. "You guys are going to love it," Todd said, a strange smile playing on his lips. It's an incredible feeling of power. If only we had recognized the warning signs in that smile. We met the brothers at the agreed-upon spot, an isolated area near the river. Todd carried a heavy backpack that clanked as he moved. Eric stayed, a few steps behind, watching in silence with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Ready for some fun?" Todd asked, unzipping the backpack. My blood ran cold when I saw what was inside. They weren't BB guns. They were real pistols, heavy and deadly, with the metal gleaming under the afternoon sun. "They belong to our dad," Eric finally said, his voice eerily calm. "He taught us to shoot when we were little. We've already killed lots of animals." Michael grabbed my hand, trembling. "We need to go," I whispered, stepping back. "Our mom is waiting." "You're not going anywhere," Todd said, picking up one of the guns. He didn't point it at us, but the message was clear. "We haven't shown you the best part yet. We managed to get away, making up excuses and practically running back home. We thought the nightmare was over. How wrong we were." That night, I woke up to a weight on my bed. Before I could scream, I felt the cold metal of a gun barrel pressed against my temple. "If you tell anyone," Todd whispered, his warm breath against my ear, "I'll kill your whole family, starting with your little brother." His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of someone who wasn't bluffing. "First, I'll make you watch. I want you to see their eyes when they realize they're dying because of you. How about that?" I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. Me, frozen in terror, and him, pressing the gun to my head, describing in disturbing detail how he would kill every member of my family. "This is just a friendly warning," he finally said, standing up. "Tomorrow we're going to play again, and you and Michael are going to take part, or else." He left the threat hanging in the air, slipping out the window as silently as he had come in. I spent the rest of the night trembling under my blankets, wondering how he had gotten in, how long he had been watching me sleep before waking me up. The following weeks were a living nightmare. Michael and I lived in constant fear. Todd and Eric would show up in the most unexpected places, on the way to school, at the park, even in our backyard at night. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of soft tapping on my window. It was Todd, sitting on a tree branch nearby, pointing a gun at me and flashing that empty smile. Other times we would find gifts, empty bullet casings in our backpacks, pictures of us sleeping, disturbing drawings of our family dead. The worst part was that they never physically hurt us. It was always threats, always psychological terror. "It's more fun this way," Eric explained once, showing us pictures he had taken of our little sister at the playground. "Fear is better than pain." Our behavior changed drastically. We hardly slept, barely ate. Our parents noticed, of course, but what could we say? Todd had made it very clear what would happen if we told anyone. One night I overheard Todd and Eric talking outside my window. They were discussing a grand finale, something they had planned for Michael's birthday the following week. The way they talked about the details, laughing quietly, I knew we had to get out of there. Desperate, I started sabotaging our own house. I secretly broke pipes, damaged the electrical wiring, and created problems that would force our parents to move. It worked. 3 weeks later, we were in another city. We never told anyone what really happened that summer. Years later, while searching the internet, I found something disturbing. 2 years after we moved, a family with 3 children moved into our old house. 3 months later, they were all found dead, murdered in their sleep, each with a single precise gunshot to the head. The main suspects were 2 teenage boys from the neighborhood, but they were never found. Today, I have my own family, my own children. I never let them play with neighbors I don't know well. I installed the most advanced security system I could find. I checked the windows 3 times before going to bed, because sometimes, on the quietest nights, I still hear that soft tapping on the glass. I still see that empty smile in the darkness, and I wonder, are Todd and Eric still out there? Are they still playing with other kids? Last week, my 12-year-old son mentioned that he met 2 new brothers in the neighborhood. "They have really cool guns," he said excitedly. "They invited me to go shoot by the river. We're moving tomorrow. Some stories don't need a second chapter. If this story gave you chills, then imagine living something like this in real life." If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment on the story that scared you the most, and subscribe for more content like this. And now, ready to dive deeper into the horror? Watch the suggested video and prepare for more stories that will keep you up at night. Your home should be your refuge, the place where you feel safest. But when someone violates that safety, when madness invades your most intimate space, something inside you breaks, something that can never be fixed again. I live alone in a small house in the suburbs. Nothing special, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for a table. But it was my little place, my first home after moving out of my parents' house, or at least it was. Until that night. My neighbors moved into the house next door 6 months ago. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman in her 70s, and her daughter, Claire. From the very beginning, something seemed off about them. Mrs. Peterson was bitter, hostile, the kind of person who yelled at kids for stepping on her lawn. But Claire was different. She must have been around 30, but sometimes she acted like a child. Other times she would completely change, screaming, breaking things, having conversations with people who weren't there. It was obvious she had serious mental health issues, but her mother refused to seek professional help. The first incidents were small, Claire yelling my name in the middle of the night, accusing me of stealing her special messages. Throwing rocks at my windows when she thought I was spying on her. Mrs. Peterson always defended her, blaming me for provoking her daughter. "You don't understand," she would say, her face twisted with disdain. "Claire is sensitive. She sees things that people like you can't." Over time, the episodes became more intense. Claire started showing up in my backyard, sometimes in the middle of the night, digging holes and mumbling about hidden treasures. Once, I found her trying to break into my back door, convinced that I had stolen her thoughts. The police were called multiple times, but nothing ever changed. Mrs. Peterson always managed to convince them that everything was under control, that Claire was just having a difficult day. The officers, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, suggested I install cameras and reinforce my locks. Then came that night, the night that changed everything. It was around 3 in the morning when I heard the first noise, a scratching sound, like nails dragging against wood coming from the hallway. At first I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, or maybe an animal on the roof. Then I heard the footsteps, slow, dragging, as if someone was sliding their feet across the floor, and something else, a low murmur, a familiar voice humming a distorted lullaby. My body froze. I wanted to get up, run, scream, but I was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps were getting closer to my room, and with them the singing became clearer. It was Claire, and she was singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" in a tone that made my hair stand on end. My bedroom door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I saw a shadow moving, and then she was there. Claire standing at the foot of my bed, her pale face almost glowing in the darkness. Her eyes were wide open, locked onto mine, and her smile, that smile was something that shouldn't exist on a human face. She leaned over, me, her face getting so close that I could feel her warm breath. Her eyes were unfocused, as if she was looking through me at something beyond. "You stole my dreams," she whispered, her voice a grotesque mix of a child and an adult. "Now I have to take yours." Then she screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was something primal, animalistic, the sound of a shattered mind manifesting through human vocal cords, the kind of sound that haunts you in nightmares. I jumped out of bed, shoving her away. Claire fell, but she kept alternating between laughing and screaming. I ran to the bathroom, the only door in the house with a reinforced lock, and locked myself inside. For the next hour, I heard Claire wandering through the house, breaking things, still shifting between laughter and screams. Sometimes she stopped right outside the bathroom door, scratching at the wood and whispering that she knew I had stolen her dreams and that I needed to give them back through my eyes. The police arrived after what felt like an eternity. They took Claire away, still laughing and screaming about stolen dreams, but before getting into the police car, she looked straight at me and said with an eerie clarity, "You can't lock your dreams away forever. I'll always find a way back." Last week I received a letter from the psychiatric hospital. It wasn't signed, but I recognized Claire's childish handwriting. "Mom says you still have my dreams. She promised to help me get them back. Don't worry. This time we'll do it right. This time we'll take your eyes first, so the dreams have nowhere to escape. I'm looking for a new place to live, but it's hard. Every house I visit, I wonder if the walls are thick enough to muffle screams, if the doors are strong enough to keep madness out, if the windows are high enough to stop someone from getting in at night. Because now I know, the real madness isn't what Claire did. It's the constant fear that she or Mrs. Peterson or both will eventually come back to finish what they started that night. This morning, I found something in my mailbox that made me decide to leave immediately. A torn-out page from a children's book with the poem, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The words had been altered in red ink. "Twinkle, twinkle, your bright eyes, soon, so soon, they'll be mine. When the night turns black as coal, I will come to take your soul. Twinkle, twinkle, don't you hide, you can't escape what's inside." And below, in shaky handwriting that I recognized as Mrs. Peterson's, "Claire is coming home next week. She can't wait to complete her collection of dreams." If these stories gave you chills, imagine experiencing something like this in real life. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment on which story scared you the most, and subscribe for more content like this. And now, how about diving deeper into the horror? Watch the suggested video and get ready for more stories that will keep you awake at night.